1% of dudes rapping, they ain't nice as me. 98% ain't live the same type of life as me. The judge gave me life and then they sent me where the life is be. That level 4 with depth and vice, the type of stuff they like to see. Two choices, fight or flee. I refuse to die a chump. I never been a mark, but damn, it's scary when that riot jump. I seen dudes cry, get pumped, and some sexually brutalized. Knew a dude who lost his life and he was only doing 5 year-long racial fights when homie all you do is ride. Lonely days and nights up in a hole causing suicide. From the moment you arrive, you see the Mexican mafia, AB skinheads with big giant swastikas, pro-black philosophers, the BGF, the Kumi, and Muslims who will murk you from the nation to the Sunni. That MS was loony, quick to ride up on they rival. Even Christians went to church, hide knives up in a Bible. Political and tribal, the Crips and Damus, the Long Beach, the Hubs and the Dubs and the Grooves, the IE, the Bakersfield, the Dago Pyrus, the Hustlers quick to roll, the gangsters don't move, whatever click.
So today I'm gonna be doing a reaction to a channel. It's called DOC TV. So y'all definitely be sure to go like, subscribe, check it out. He's got some great interviews on there. Today he's interviewing a dude by the name of, I believe his name is Tommy, and he served 28 years in a lot of these dangerous California prison, level 4s and stuff like that, man. So let's get into what he's got to say. Once again, it is DOC TV. Y'all be sure to go check it out.
So if you can, man, take the people through what it was like your first couple months at Salinas Valley. Like, what was the vibe?
Yeah, well, so the reason I ended up in Salinas was after they had flipped that yard in Kern Valley, and the reason why they chose to send me to Salinas was Salinas Valley, it was a 270 yard. I had just got my 270 status back, and so they sent me there because they were flipping it from a level 3 to a level 2. From level 3 to a level 4. So I showed up as part of the level 4 guys, and I was going into Salinas to fill those spots of those level 3s that were being transferred out. But we were on lockdown. As soon as I got there, already on lockdown, right? Because they had an issue with some level 4s who had stabbed a level 3, and so now they want to get all these level 3s out of there before the level 4s get any program. And then there was an ongoing war between the North Kingdoms and the blacks.
So now what he's talking about is they have a yard and they're flipping the yard from a level 3 to a level 4. And I guess someone had got stabbed who was a level 3 and they got stabbed by a level 4. Well, there's a book, it's called the Title 15, and it's basically a rule book that regulates the prisons in terms of for the convicts and for the COs, and it's a bunch of rules and stuff and their do's and don'ts, so on and so forth. And a section of that says that if you have level 3 points, because the California prison system is predicated on a point system, you have to have a certain amount of points to be on a level 3. You have to have a certain amount of points to be on a level 4. The more in trouble you get, your points go higher, and they have certain little things that will make you have points, or at least they did when I went to prison. Like if you have ever completed high school, your crime, how much time you had, if you've ever been to prison before, maybe if you had been to the military, they deduct points, so on and so forth, right? And so in this book, it says that you must be housed with other prisoners of that same security level. So a dude being on a level 4 when he only had level 3 points definitely was a lawsuit, because you have him housed around dudes who he's not supposed to be housed around. And so what he's saying is here they wanted to get all those level 3s off that particular yard before they let any more level 4s, before they let them program together. So yeah, it was definitely a potential lawsuit issue.
So we were getting like some program, we would get day room like every other day, for a couple hours. That was like our program, right? And but the day I walked into the prison, I ran into a guy that I knew from other prisons. He was in the building with me, and he came down and hey, what's going on, man? I'm glad you're here. And then the guy who had the yard showed up, and like immediately was like, here you go. He gave me a cell phone, some drugs, what we call a roll call, a list of people on the yard who were on the yard, their names and background information, CDC numbers, things like that. And then, he's like, and I was trying to tell him, no, go ahead. It's you, right? Because I have a little weird philosophy when I go onto a facility. I don't like to just take over right away. I like to try to stand back and see who's doing what, how they're operating, things like that. And then I like to make a power move. Boom, you know what I mean? If the shot caller's not doing what he's supposed to be doing, or he's supposed to be there, then I round up my crew of guys, and then we annihilate that dude.
So basically what he's saying is when he pulled up to the yard, I guess due to his reputation, due to being well known, the dude who was in charge of the yard for the whites was trying to give him the keys, like saying, hey man, here, you take control of the yard.
Who he's going with. We never know who's on his leg. You know what I mean? So when a guy comes to you and he just immediately trying to give you the keys, I was like, it doesn't.
He might be handing off some debt or some shit.
Well, I'm immediately wondering what's going on with him. Okay. And then, what's funny is he gave me the keys and 2 weeks later he pieced it up. You know what I mean? So I didn't even get a chance to do anything with him. He just immediately split, right? Which I understand now because he had a lot of other skeletons in his closet. And the guy that I knew from the other prisons who came and talked to me the day I got there, he had went and told him, hey, you got to watch out for this guy. You know what I mean? He's going to lay low, and if you're fucking up, he's going to make it happen. And so that dude got scared, because he was fucking up. He was clipping off the top. And the next thing you know, he was gone,
And he was crashing all the way out.
He had been. And he was a level 3, right? And that's why I was like, why has he even got the yard? He's not going to be here. He's leaving. Who should have, who else is here? So then, we went through, I don't want to say power struggle. There was kind of like a little issue where I decided, hey, you guys figure out who you want to have the yard. You know what I mean? Nope, not a lot of people knew me. They knew my name, but they didn't know me. There's difference, right? So I kind of just laid low, but that didn't last very long.
How long was it before you had to partake in some violence? Like at Salinas?
As far as
now, you may have some individuals out there wondering if the blacks, the Crips, the Bloods, they have these certain type of issues, which are, who's going to be the shot caller. And once again, due to the Crips and the Bloods, especially the Crips having so many different factions within the Crips sets themselves, you don't have quote unquote shot callers. You may have individuals who, due to their reputation, due to their knowledge of prison and how prison politics play out, you may have a couple of individuals who will call shots for that particular cause, somewhat of a council, but not necessarily a voted in council, not a elected council, just due to by their knowledge, speak for their car, and they kind of step forward when it's certain type of issues, but you don't have quote unquote shot callers for the Crips and the Bloods in most occasions.
Ordering or within a couple months, right? I don't know the exact, I couldn't give you the exact time, but there was a guy there that had stole some stuff from another race, and a stupid dude called me on the stolen cell phone. You know what I mean? So another guy, white guy, stole a cell phone from another race, right? And then he calls me on the cell phone.
Oh my God.
Not knowing that on my cell phone I have that dude's number. Right?
That's funny.
Because he's, it was somebody we did business with, right? So I'm like, so when he called, I'm like, hey, and it was the other dude, and I'm like, and the other guy had already said, hey, the phone got stolen. You know what I mean? We're looking for it, and I was like, this dude's an idiot.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So I end up having to have him stabbed right away, and it's because it was another race. Now, the truth is, I'm one of those guys, if you want to go punk somebody for something, and I mean walk over and take it from them, that's one thing, right? It's another thing to steal something from somebody when they're not looking. And then act like you don't know what the hell's going on. You know what I mean? So I was, we ended up having to have him removed, like right away.
So what he's saying there too is, if, okay, so this is something that I first learned when I got to the county jail. Prison thieves, county jail thieves are detested. A person who will, if you happen to leave, say you leave you go in the shower and you leave your bar of soap in there. No one's even supposed to take that bar of soap. You're not supposed to take anything from anybody, despite having a lot of criminals, a lot of murderers in prison. That's something that's detested, right? Stealing, now stealing. So what he's talking about, he doesn't mind. And you have a lot of people who actually have this ideology. They don't mind if you go gangster somebody. out of something. Like if you go approach a person one-on-one and say, hey man, I'm taking that cell phone, I'm taking this item, I'm taking that item. If that person doesn't stick up for himself, that's on that person, right? But as far as just stealing, doing things that when nobody's looking, being a thief and stealing without a person's knowledge, that is something that is heavily detested, and that's something that will get you blasted out of your boots quickly.
You know what I mean? And then we were all locked down for a little while, and things were kind of calm. The thing about Salinas Valley is that when I got there, because there was so much money to be made, I tried to keep the level of violence down to a minimum. You know what I mean? Because the longer you're on lockdown, the less money you're making, right? And in that situation, because there was a lot of corruptness at that time, and I won't say that Salinas Valley is less corrupt. I don't know. I'm not, in there. I don't know. I'm not in there as an inmate or anything like that or whatever. But I know that, like, at that time, Salinas Valley was super corrupt when it came to cell phones, drugs, things like that, right? They were coming in from everywhere. And so if you wanted to be a part of that, you had to stay mobile. You know what I mean? Meaning not locked down while everybody else is out. You needed to stay in the mix. You needed to stay mobile. So my job was to keep the violence down to a minimum, take care of the people that need to be taken care of, but make sure that money continues to flow, right?
And so the reason, of course, why it's very important to not try to be on lockdown is because, of course, you don't have prisoners leaving the facility and coming back in the facility. So a lot of the contraband is brought in by people who are not prisoners. You have a group of individuals who we sometimes call free staffs, and they work in the prison in positions that are not like correctional officer type positions. So you might have people who work as the cook. You might have people who work in the laundry, who they control, and supervise the prisoners and the convicts in the laundry, the guy who supervises the paint crew, so on and so forth, and sometimes, keep it 100, sometimes, some of this illegal contraband is brought in by correctional officers who want to make a lot of extra money, So in order to get to those things, you have to be able to go to these jobs, these paint crews. You have to be able to go to, the carpentry class, or maybe the auto mechanic shop, or the computer class, to meet with this, this free staff who's bringing this stuff in. And so if your particular group or structure is locked down, you can't get to these avenues and bring this money in. So that's why a lot of times it's very important to try to work things out when they can be worked out, when they don't necessarily 100% call for violence, because everybody in there is trying to make money, or at least everybody who has action at making money.
So that's why I went there. Matter of fact, at one point, one of the captains pulled me out after a particular incident and was like, hey, look, just so you know, the only reason I keep you here is because you've been a peaceful presence. keep it that way. And I'll let you get away with whatever you want. Yeah, keep it that way. You know what I mean? And so, I stayed there for about 5 years before they finally got rid of me, before some stuff erupted and there was a big old power struggle between, two factions of whites, and then there was a big old...
So what happened with that? That sounds...
Now I'm trying to interrupt as little as possible, right? But he's saying some things that may sound unbelievable to a person who's never been to prison. The captain is going to come and tell you, because the captain is right under the warden. So he's pretty much second in charge. So people are thinking that they may be like, oh, that's incredulous. The captain's going to come tell you, I'll let you do whatever you want to do. Well, of course, right? Because the administration, sergeants, lieutenants, captains, they have basically been doing time and in prison as long as you've been having convicts come and do time. And so they know, many of them have the attitude, they know certain things are going to happen in prison. It's just the nature of prison. As long as you're not doing nothing, harming the officers, causing chaos on the yard where they have to report, they have to respond, write up paperwork, you will have many individuals on the administration side say, hey man, you guys go do what you do, just kind of stay out the way, because once again, this is prison. This is a level 4 prison. You have killers, you have murders, robbers, things are going to happen in terms of the criminal world, right? And so once again, you have a lot of people in administration who not necessarily turn a blind eye to that, but they will let you do so much as long as you guys don't get out of control with it.
So like at that time it was, I mean, you probably heard of Public Enemy number 1, P9 Skins, right? There was a couple guys that showed up for P9 that, claiming they had the facility. There was another guy on another facility claiming to have the facility, and just like claiming to have the whole place. It was just, there was this huge power struggle going on. And then one guy showed up and said somebody else was a rat, all this different stuff. Well, that dude they were saying was a rat was part of my inner circle. You know what I mean? So I'm like, hey, where's the paperwork? You say he's a rat, I want to see the paperwork, right? And they're trying to say this other guy had it and all this other stuff. So they created this division at that moment, right? And then so shit hit the fan. One day they came out, the guy that was saying the other dude was a rat sent somebody on a little mission to try to get that dude, right? So when they moved on him, me and one of my best friends, one of my closest allies, and we jumped in. And then next thing you know, a bunch of people jumped in. Next year was this big old white on white, dust up on the yard. And they ended up removing everybody from that specific facility, putting us all in that seg. And that created just so many issues, because now the whole leadership structure is gone. And now there's a power vacuum, where people are now trying to like, okay, who's going to take over? Who's going to run this? Who's going to run that? Who's going to keep, because that was my job and I was good at it, right? And I'm not proud of that now, but at the time I was good at it, right? So I was like, now all this shit's gone. Who's going to talk to the blacks? Who's going to talk to the Mexicans? Who's going to do this? Who's going to do that, right? And so when we all went to the because I had to jump in. I mean, one of my closest allies getting hit,
Yeah, you got to go.
I got to go. Yeah. We have to. I didn't have to. I guess I could have stayed back. I think back on it, I could have stayed back, right? Nobody would have made a big old fuss about it. But that's not how I operated. I operated like, if you got my back, I got your back. You know what I mean? I'm going to help you out, right? And in this case, he was wrongfully, hit. It came out later that it wasn't true, that his crime partner was trying to smut him up because his crime partner was mad about some other bullshit. You know what I mean? So, and that happens. It happens. That's part of prison politics, right? Is if you.
Now, I'm just assuming, right, that he just said that the dude who was hit unjustly, unrighteous. He was not a snitch or a rat or whatever. So, of course, when you make a move like that in prison, first you don't have the paperwork, right? And then you make a move like that. Even just putting that type of slander on a person's character can get you blasted out. Your boots can get you killed. But then you double down. Not only do you say a person is a rat, but you double down and you attack that person. I'm assuming those dudes ended up getting into a whole lot of trouble.
You get the ear of the right guy, man, you could really have some shit done without showing any paperwork, right? So, yeah, so we ended up on a whole nother facility, went over there, you know what I mean, and immediately, right in the middle of it, and, and I'm trying to orchestrate stuff back on this other facility to get those guys, but then everybody started piecing up, right? Everybody that was involved in that incident all started piecing up,
right?
And so it was kind of hard, you can't get them once they go to the PC yards, right? So once they're over there, it's a wrap. It's over. But at the same time, you got your guys, but now we're all struggling to get back into that situation, right? But I'll say this, man, and I hate to say it, and I don't like talking about it in that way, but there was so much drugs coming into that prison. There was time when I was getting 4 pieces of heroin, 4 ounces of speed, 2 pounds of weed, and 20 phones every week. You know what I mean?
Hold on. So that's one of the questions I want to ask you, was how much money you were bringing in from like moving that much type of stuff. But that's the kind of stuff you were getting in?
Yeah, I walked straight to my cell.
That's nuts. So everybody had a phone then?
For a long time. It got to the point to where I stopped bringing in phones because they weren't selling. Like, dudes would come to my door and be like, hey, you got T-Mobile, you got this, you got... Well, no, I got Verizon right now. Oh, no, I want T-Mobile. You know what I mean? They were getting picky, And there was a time when I had a bunch of phones hidden that I couldn't sell. You know what I mean? Because everybody had one. All the people that had the money had one, right?
Yeah, it was flooded.
Yeah, little flip phones were only going for like $200. It was so flooded. You know what I mean? And prison, those are usually 1,800. You know what I mean? These things are going
Yeah, that's crazy. My first phone in prison, my only phone in prison actually was a Verizon flip phone, and I paid $600 for it. This was 2011. After I bought the phone, I don't know, maybe a couple of months, I happened to run across a newspaper and it had ads for Radio Shack. And that particular phone that I bought was only $15 at Radio Shack. But of course, the markup is so high in prison because these things are definitely valuable wanted items. And so the more people want them, then the higher you can raise the price. And then, as he's saying, just like supply and demand, the more the phones are on the yard and they're available, then of course the price goes down.
For $250. And man, it got to the point to where I was waiting for people to get rated. And as soon as they get rated, I just go slide them the phone and just get me when you can.
You were in there, like, what person got in the most debt that you remember?
Oh man, you know what? There was a guy that was over $30,000 with the blacks. You know what I mean?
With the opposite race?
With an opposite race, because he couldn't buy from me. You know what I mean?
Man, he was dead in the addiction then.
Yeah. And
to the opposite, like to get
Well, you know what? His old lady, right? And she had tons of money. She was making, $1 million a year. She was in some advertising company. She was making a ton of money. And she got laid off. You know what I mean?
And then that hard time came because that canteen window closed on his ass.
Quick, right? And then they started struggling. She's like, hey, I can't pay for your drug debts right now because now I have to move to this other company in Minnesota, from California to Minnesota, and now I'm using all that money that we saved up to move, to get a place and do all this other stuff. I don't have the money to pay that debt. You're going to have to wait a couple months.
So what was his reaction?
Well, he didn't tell us about it at first.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he didn't come to me and go, and that's the one of the things, man, I was trying to explain to him too. But right before, he got hit, right? It's like, you would have just came to me, bro. I might have been able to work with you. I might have been able to buy you time. I was making anywhere between 15 to 20 grand a month, right? So I'm like, you could come in, you could have came to me, bro, and I would have helped you. But instead, you're over here lying to me. Because I went to him after I found out the blacks came to me and they're like, hey, this dude showed me the paperwork, and I was like, oh, shit. You know what I mean? I'm like, why'd you let him get that far?
Yeah, that's what I was.
Because he was paying it, is what they kept saying, right? He was paying it. Well, of course, but for one, he ain't even supposed to be doing business with you guys. You know what I mean? So what happened?
And once again, I said this in another video, you have different races who have these rules that they're not supposed to do business with the blacks, but people are in prison trying to get high. At the end of the day, people want to get high, and if they can't get it where they're supposed to get it from, they're going to find other avenues. Now, why did the blacks let this dude get so high? I'm gonna keep it 100% honest with you guys. It's greed, man. It's greed. When you have an individual, let's call this white guy, let's just call him Kenny. When you have Kenny running around, buying this contraband, spending lots of money, word gets out, right? So if me and Joe are hustling and we're into selling whatever Kenny likes, Joe might be out. He said, hey, chill, man. Kenny, man, he just spent, $6,000 with me last month. You have a lot of dudes in prison, right? Hustling, making money to send to their families, to buy their kids this, to buy their kids that. You have people saving money for lawyers, all types of things. Sometimes these dudes are 7-8 hours away from home. Salinas Valley, when I was in Salinas Valley, that was like a 6-7 hour ride. So in order for my family to come up, they have to come up, they get a hotel room, they drive, far, you spend money in the hotel room. So a visit literally can be a $700-800 trip, once you get the room, the gas, the food and stuff like that, right? And so you have people making money for all different types of things. Like I said, I was hustling tobacco, I was able to, pay for my daughter's prom, bought her flowers, all types of stuff, dress, everything for her prom, right? So it's a lot of money to be made in prison. And so once again, when word gets around that Kenny has money, you have people now trying to lock into him and offering him things, right? I've seen this happen many, many times. And of course, especially when the dude is paying, the dude is paying, he's making money, then it never fails. Suddenly something happens and the dude is no longer able to pay. And now suddenly you have a lot of individuals who they want to be paid. If we agree to pay me by the next month on the 10th, man, I want my money. And so that's how situations like that occur.
How to get that far? we ended up whacking him, you know. So he got chopped up. I mean, he didn't die. I think, you know, thankfully he didn't die, but he got life flighted out of there. I mean, he's missing, you know, part of his liver, and, you know, he's probably going to poop in a bag for the rest of his life. But, you know, just...
Would you say that, like, the main problem, like, with violence and all the stabbings and maybe even the gangs is caused by so many people being high while they're in there and on drugs?
Absolutely. Well, drugs is, I mean, you know, I believe fully that drugs are used to control people, right? I mean, Manson did it with his little following, you know what I mean? And I think that's the case with, you know, the organizations in there, as well as the staff, right? Is they allow a certain amount of drugs to come in because it keeps the population under control. People want to get high. People want to do this, you know what I mean? And it kind of like, and you know, we did it to each other. You know, we bring them in, we sell the stuff, and then when I needed somebody to do something that was, you know, hey, how much money you owe? Oh, you're up $1,600? Well, this guy's up 12. Why don't you whack him?
Let me ask you this question. So if we're in a...
You know, you heard what he just said right there in terms of, you know, having a dude get a debt up and then letting him pay his debt off by going to stab somebody or whatever. Prison is definitely a cold mind manipulation game, right? And it's true that, you know, once again, you do have certain institutions who will let a certain amount of drugs come in there because it placates everybody, right? One thing I have seen that is unanimous in all prisons that they do not like. They do not like alcohol. They do not like prisoner manufactured wine. Reason being, you have the prisoners in there, convicts, getting drunk, and not only do they want to fight each other, but they want to fight staff. And that's one thing that they hate, because when you have individuals fighting staff, sometimes you have their homeboys jump in, you have staff having to respond. There's the potential for them to get hurt. And that's something that they have always been hard on ever since I've been in prison, is prison manufactured alcohol known as Pruno.
And like, if me and you were in a dorm and there's a bunch of other white boys, we're all in the same clique affiliated, and a new white boy comes in the dorm, and like two of the other white boys go over to him and find out he gets money and he also does dope. Are those two white boys now going to go to another white boy, get the dope, and then sell it to him and kind of cuff him and bring him into the group? Or are they going to be like, nah, bro, if you're riding with us, that ain't going to happen. Like, you're not going to get high.
No, they're going to get them high. Because here's what's happening, right? A lot of guys are like, okay, I'm going to go buy 3 grams for $500, and I'm going to turn around and chip this dude off, you know, $1,000 for $500. Yeah. So I can keep the, you know, I'm going to chip him quarter grams for $100 until he pays his $500 off, and then I keep the rest. And then me and my buddies get high, right? That's what they do. Like, one of the things is you buy 3 grams of heroin for $500, you know, people would make little papers out of it, little quarter grams, little $50 papers and stuff, and they would sling it to pay off that $500. But when there's a mass amount of dope on the yard, you're not making that much money on that shit. Plus, they're only making enough to stay high.
Right. Do it for free.
Money. Yeah, they're basically. Hopefully. Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, right? They get these new kids showing up that they find out not only they got money and their family's taking care of them, but they get high, so they want to pull them under their wing so they can chip them off. Hey, let me go get you some dope. Let me go get you this, you know? Oh, yeah, this guy wants $200 for his gram. They don't want $200 for that gram. He only wanted $150. You know what I mean? Yeah, right. So now this dude, you know what I mean? Now this dude's pulling 50, which is hustle, right? I guess it's hustle, but at the same time, when that kid can't pay, guess what? They victimize that kid.
Right. You know what I mean? You think that's self-destructive for the race, though? Like, to operate that way?
Yeah, and you know what's messed up? It's not just the whites.
No, I know. Yeah, I'm sure it
is self-destructive, right? And it's one of those situations to where, like, if I could have controlled that part of it, I would have. You know what I mean? It was really hard. Like, I didn't sell to the whites, not because I didn't want them getting high, but because I didn't trust them. You know what I mean?
It's crazy.
Just straight up, right? Yeah, I know. Within our organization, right? If I had sold to the whites and they didn't pay me, I'd have to deal with that. You know, personally. If they didn't pay me, I'd have to deal with the person. You know, sure, I could have ordered it and it would have definitely gotten done. But over time, what would end up happening was people would start looking at you like, oh, you don't want to handle your own business. Right? Because you're only good as your last hit. You know what I mean? So what I would do was every once in a while, whites would get pissed off at me. Oh, no, you don't sell the whites. No, I don't. If you want to come up with the money up front, I'll sell you a whole piece of heroin, $2,000, a whole piece. There you go, 25 grams for $2,000. You can make as much money as you want.
And you know, I won't necessarily say I did something similar when I was selling weed, but it was always better to sell it to a person from another race, because a person from another race is going to try to pay you as hard as he can, because he doesn't want that big issue that's going to be created, especially when his own folks hear that he owes you money. Even if it's like, even with the Asians, even with someone that, you know, they didn't have, the Asians don't have a policy where they're not supposed to do business with the blacks, right? So even with them, the Asians know, okay, I have to pay because this is another race. This is going to get my race involved. It's going to make me look bad, so on and so forth, you know. And so, because when you do it in-house, like he said, of course, then it's something that you have to deal with, you know, personally. You know, okay, if I dealt with, you know, I dealt with T Loke and T Loke didn't pay me, that's me and T Loke's issue, you know. And so it's a lot of, like I said, once again, it's a lot of let's say chess playing that goes on in these businesses in prison, you know, these illegal activities and so on and so forth. And it's really a treacherous environment, because like I said, once again, you know, most times a person who's coming to get these illicit things, at some point either his money's going to run out, his family's going to get suspicious. Why am I always sending you money for this? Why am I always sending you money for that? You know, how long do I have to send you $300 a month for your legal fees and to buy stamps and this and that? You know, these dudes chasing these you know, this contraband, at times they start to become unbelievable, and eventually, for whatever reason, their money is going to dry up. It's going to be a problem. Then you're going to have an issue.
But we got to come up with the money first. You know what I mean? Or because I had an avenue where I was bringing shit in through, right? I'm like, hey, get a package ready, get the money ready to pay the guy to bring it for me, and I'll let you use that avenue that week. I'm not tripping. I'm making enough money. I'm not really tripping. But you couldn't do it. So what ends up happening is they want to say, well, can you front me? No. I ain't fronting you nothing. You know what I mean? There was a few guys on the yard, like a couple blacks, a couple northerners. And my thing was, as long as everybody was getting a piece of the bag, every race, it was cool. You know what I mean? So if you share with the others, you know, I'd let some guy who was an elder bring some stuff in every once in a while. I let a southerner bring some stuff in, and then we would all sell in bulk to the other races.
Now, listen, I'm not going to lie, man. I like this dude, man. This dude, he sounds fair. I don't get one iota of a racist vibe from this dude, man. This dude is just in prison. He's doing what he has to do. He's making it work the way he has to make it work. You know, being a dude who functioned with the white dudes. I think I heard him say he was from some place where, whatever town he's from, it's not a lot of blacks out there, right? But like I said, once again, I don't get any racist vibe from this dude, man. And I just think that's stand up, because a lot of people, they go to prison, especially in some of these prisons where he's done time in, you know, it's a lot of racial animus going around, right? And sometimes people let the circumstances make them racist or make them more racist. So, you know, once again, man, this guy he sounds like a stand-up dude. He doesn't have a problem with any other race. He's just functioning, you know, doing his time as, you know, the white guys in prison do their time.
Right? So that they can make money. Now everybody's making money. Everybody's happy. The more money people are making, the happier people are. The less likely there are violence on the yard, and you can control the situation way better that way. You know?
Was it hard for you to like program with other whites that weren't getting high and get like fucking off?
No, actually, I try to surround myself with those people. You know what I mean? With the people that didn't get high, right? Because I never tried it. So I would try to surround myself, because those people were more trustworthy. You know what I mean? I can relate with them, but also there were some that were like, they weren't getting high, but they also didn't want to be nothing to do with the mix. You know what I mean? And I get that. So I kind of just left them alone, let them do their own thing, right? And there was a couple times people would get at me and they're like, hey, why don't you ask, you know, we had a really good friend of mine named Eddie Kane, right? And Eddie Kane kind of stayed out of the mix, but I liked Eddie a lot. But he didn't get high, he didn't mess around, but he was doing LWAP, right? So a lot of guys We're like, why don't you ask Eddie to do it? Because Eddie's not trying to get involved. You know what I mean? Why don't you ask Eddie to do this? He's not trying to get involved. Why would I ask Eddie to do anything? That dude's minding his own business. You know what I mean? They go, but you asked that one guy to put in work. He's only got 5 years. I mean, yeah, but he's running around with dope in his pocket. That's a felony in prison. That's a life sentence in California, right? You can get life sentence for that under the 3 strikes law. I said, he's willing to put his life on the line for drugs, but he's not willing to put his life on for the whip-off? Why would I care about that dude?
Right.
You know what I mean? So, but Eddie over here is minding his own business, not causing me any problems. But you want me to get rid of the guy that's not causing me problems and keep the guys that are. I said, that makes no sense to me.
That's a stand-up philosophy right there, right? And once again, so he said the dude Eddie had an LWOP. An LWOP is an acronym for life without parole. Now, a lot of people would assume that since this dude has life without parole, he doesn't give a fuck about going home. You know, he don't care. He's never going home anyway. But that's sometimes in certain situations, that's just not always the truth, because at the end of the day, right, he said Eddie's not bothering anybody. Some people see going to the hole as even a bigger inconvenience than being in prison. At some point in time, some individuals realize, okay, damn, fuck, I've already thrown my life away, right? But at least on the main line, I'm allowed, to watch my TV. I can go to the store. I can grab a cold soda. The small little amenities that make prison a little bit better, for some individuals. Now, you have other individuals who have the mindset of, fuck it, man, I've already thrown my life away. I'm going all out. I don't give a fuck about nothing, right? And just because this individual has life without parole doesn't mean he doesn't have hopes of going home. You have a lot of people in there who go to the legal library, they try to get their case overturned, so on and so forth, right? And they don't want to get themselves caught up in other predicaments that may that may just mess up their chances of going home. You have some individuals who are innocent. You have some individuals who are guilty and still feel that for whatever reason they can wiggle their way out of it. So I just like his philosophy and his breakdown, because once again, not everybody who has life is a crash dummy. You have these other YouTubers who try to portray that, people are crash dummies and people don't care. And, that's just not the truth. And so once again, I like this dude's, his philosophy and his transparency.
You know what I mean? Yeah. So, that's why I think one time we had that conversation about, I had to control the amount of information that was going back to the back. Right. So for every 2 or 3 guys that didn't like me, I would send a guy that did. Right. Some people would say it doesn't pay to be Tommy's friend because he's going to send you on a mission. And it's true, right? But I also had to control the amount of information that was going out, right? So, like if, 3 guys go back there and they're smutting me up, most of the time they're smutting me up because I took their drugs away from them, or I took their program away from them, or whatever. They were fucking up. So, I'd send a guy back there who will, say, hey, Tommy sent him back here. These are the reasons why. Because they often completely leave out the fact that they were in debt $1,200.
Right, yeah.
You know what I mean? And they go back there and they go, oh, you got Tommy sending me on a mission. I'm 3 years to the pad. They don't say, hey, Tommy sent me on a mission because I was $1,200 in debt.
Right.
You know what I mean? They left that part out. And then my guy would show up. And we'd be like, no, homeboy was $1,200 in debt. No, homeboy was this. Homeboy was doing dope. Because we're not allowed to take, open consumable, right, from blacks or northerners or whatever, right? So, there was one guy who was taking, they were giving out these pills. Dude, they were called methadone pills.
Oh, damn, really?
Yeah, they were giving them out as pain management over there, right? They give you methadone, right? So he was getting the methadone pills from the black guy after the black guy might have been crushed, put in water, and the dude had to put them in his mouth and spit it back out, right? And dude's taking this. It's a no-no, right? But he gets back to the back and he says, I got in trouble for buying dope. But I was but what he forgot to say is that he was buying the dope from the dude that just spit it out of his freaking mouth.
Now, it's crazy that he says that, right? Maybe about a year ago, there was a Mexican dude who left a comment on on one of my videos, and he was saying the same thing. He was saying that he basically done the same thing. You know, you have people who go get these drugs, and some of these drugs, I forget the exact terminology that they use, right? But some of the drugs in the pill line that individuals go get, they're the drugs that you have to take right there in front of the nurse, and the nurse is supposed to watch you swallow them and all that stuff. Now, a lot of times some of these drugs would get people high or whatever, and so you had people who, as a hustle, would put the drugs in their mouth, keep the drugs under their tongue, then take the drugs back to the yard, spit it back out, and then sell it to the people who wanted to get high. And so the Mexican dude was saying that this is what he was doing. He was buying drugs from a black dude who would smuggle them back in his mouth. And if he said he never got caught, but he said if he had got caught for that, they would have stabbed the hell out of him. He said, but he was so much of a dope fiend that, you know, he had to take that chance because his body was craving, you know, the drugs or whatever. But I say all that to say that I think that this dude's honesty is refreshing, because honestly, you will have lots of Crips or Bloods or Blacks who have been to prison. They'll do interviews and they will talk about, I will say, the downside of doing time as a Black, or they'll be honest about the things that they don't like that goes on within the Black collectives, right? You don't hear other races come on and speak truthfully about things that go on in their particular faction or race or whatever, right? There's no, you know, the negative things never get spoke on, you know, and so it's a lot of stuff that goes on in each faction that people do not want to put out there to make their faction look bad if they functioned with that faction. And so, you know, here's a dude who, you know, who was calling the dogs, who was very influential among his people, but he's willing to still say, hey man, you know, there were things going on in our organization or with our people that was frowned upon. And so once again, you know, I just that's refreshing, because, you know, you have a lot of individuals who not necessarily going to do that. They're going to always, let me just keep it 100 right here. They're going to always make it seem like the Blacks don't do this. The Blacks got these problems. We don't have those problems. And he's, you know, he's coming with the truth, man. Anyway, though, I did a lot of talking. I think I'll stop the interview right here, man. Some dude in one of my other reactions was saying, hey man, you kept stopping and going. I try to let it play as much as I can, but also the guidelines for a reaction video on YouTube is you must periodically stop and interject your opinion, criticism, this and that, right? I can't just upload somebody's content and just let it play and let it play and let it play. That's pretty much the equivalent of stealing. So I have to stop. I have to interject, give my opinion on this, give my opinion on that. That's what makes it a reaction video. Anyway, man, you already know what it is. It's your boy 16 to Life. Once again, be sure to go check out this channel, DOC TV. He has a lot of great interviews on there. It's 16 to Life. Resume normal program.